Good evening, Sukihotu. Welcome to another week of another Dhamma sharing. This is our weekly Dhamma sharing and based on the Dhammapada Study. So today the topic is let go past, future and present, the way to the further shore. Basically, this topic covers two very important Dhammapada verses uttered by the Buddha and pertaining to the attainment of arahantship. And there's a very interesting story behind it, which I will be sharing in a moment. To help you along, please download this presentation file. Use this link to download the presentation slides that I will be using so you can follow a lot easier. Okay, so without further ado, let us proceed with the sharing. The first verse we are looking at is verse 348, where the Buddha stated, "Give up the past, give up the future, give up the present. Having reached the end of existence, with a mind freed from all conditioned things, you will never again undergo birth and decay." So in essence, what this is saying is that the Buddha is advising us that we should not have attachment to memories of past things, any existential things. That means memories of things that we were doing and this and that. So all these past we should let go. And we should not be attached to imagination of what we would like to have in the future, because this attachment is also not creating a peaceful and blissful mind. The mind will be disturbed by these imaginations. And at the same time, when we look at the present, now here it says, give up the present. I want to clarify this very important thing. When we look at the present, there are so many things that we find unpleasant and many things that we find unsatisfied, so unsatisfactory. So we feel dissatisfied with the present. And therefore, we are attached to all this dissatisfaction. But the present is continuously changing. The present itself does not remain as it is. The present is constantly changing, anicca. And with all these changes, all this impermanence, right, it creates a lot of insecurities, dukkha. And with dukkha, then we are clinging on to the self, but actually there is no self to cling on to. Anatta. So we have to realize that in order for us to attain this ultimate and most supreme attainment of Nibbana, eventually, we have to learn to let go of all these memories of the past, imagination of the future, and expectations of the present. So when we speak of imagination, that is I. Memory, that is M. Expectation, that is E. So I am E, that is what I call the I, me syndrome, where we are clinging on to the notion there is a self because there is a past. See, existence is about time and space. So we think this body exists and we think we have a past, we think we have a future, we even think there is a present, but there is no thing called present. What we call present is really a moment-to-moment transitioning, which is anicca, moment to moment. So we can only speak of experiences, right? Moment to moment experiences. So if we ever cling on to imagination, memory, and expectations, we are clinging on to this I, me syndrome. And with that, we will never attain the state of awakening called Nibbana. So this is really the Buddha's advice when he was referring to the fact that a person attains Nibbana. So therefore, we have to learn how to let go. Now, there's a very interesting story behind it. I will share with you in a moment, okay? So all this is very important to realize that we only experience things around us. What we experience around us These are the objective experiences. We call them objective because in our mind, there is this objective world out there. And yet we feel something about it. And deep inside our feeling, this is the subjective experience. So what we experience, so-called out there through our senses, that is the objective experience. How we feel about our experiences, that is the subjective experience. And these are experiences that we cling on to. And this is what the Buddha actually is teaching, has taught us to learn to give up this clinging on, attachment. And Bhante Punyaji actually used the word personalization or personalizing, coming from the Pali root word upadhana. Okay, I'll explain this upadhana towards the end of the sharing, because that is a very important part of today's sharing. So moving on, let's take a look at the story behind this Dhammapada verse 348. This is the story of Ugasena. So the Buddha spoke this with reference to Ugasena. Ugasena is a son of a very wealthy man. So in India, during those days, they all have caste system. So at the highest level are the royalties and the warriors. And next are the wealthy people, the noble people, the people who have money, the wealthy people, the well-educated, the scholars, and so on, and so on. And then going down are the merchants, going down are the laborers, and so on. So there is a caste system. And Ugasena is the son of a wealthy man. So he belongs to the caste of Brahmins. Right? These are the people who are wealthy, well-educated, very knowledgeable, and so on. So this is the caste. This is the caste system. Okay, so Ugasena is such a person. So one day there is this theatrical troupe of 500 dancers and acrobats and performers that would come to Rajagaha every year. Every year they would pass by and stop at Rajagaha and perform in front of the king, for the king Bimbisara. Okay, so they would perform for this king, and the performance would last 7 days. Of course, it is also open to the crowds, so the people would come and watch these wondrous performances by acrobats, right, and dancers and even singers. So this is an annual thing that is happening. And this theatrical troupe, they don't stay here. They are not belonging to Rajagaha. They're passing by once a year. They will stop by, perform for the king 7 days, move on to another place, and so on. They will just keep moving. And they will be back again the following year. They do this really to earn a living. So they will earn a lot of gold and silver pieces. That is the money of the day. So this is really what this theatrical troupe does, earn a living. Okay. So one of the performers is a beautiful young lady dancing on top of a pole. She's actually the daughter of an acrobat, and the father taught her acrobatics. So she's able to sing and dance and somersault on top of a very long and tall bamboo pole. So that is very impressive. She's able to do that, right? And she's very beautiful and young. So this, amongst the crowd, of course, there's this Ugasena, and he happened to be watching and noticed this beautiful dancer. Right? Ugasena, as I said, is the young son of a very wealthy man. And he saw with awe and amazement how talented this beautiful young lady is, and how skillful she's able to sing, dance, and somersault on top of a pole. So he became very attached or attracted to her. In fact, he fell desperately in love with her and wanted to marry her. So that is how bad it is. He became so much in love with her. But he also knows that they are not staying. After 7 days, they will go away. So Ugasena went home. And when he reached home, he felt very sad because he knew that they would go away. So when he returned home, then he started to think for himself. He started to imagine maybe he can have a future with this beautiful lady as his wife. Maybe the father will help him and marry this beautiful dancer into the family and raise a family so that they can live happily ever after. So he was imagining that. But he knew that it was a very difficult task because she's the son of an acrobat and they move on and she will have to stay with the father. So she may or may not agree to marry Ugasena. So Ugasena was thinking to himself, if I can have her as my wife, I shall live happily. But if I cannot have her, I will rather die right here. So in other words, he was so depressed that he wanted to marry her and felt that if he could not marry her, he would probably rather commit suicide, something like that. Okay. So he knew that it was not an easy task to be able to marry her because she had to give up her career as a dancer. So he fell onto his bed. He flung himself down onto his bed and was very upset, right? Feeling very despondent and so much so that he refused to eat. Of course, his parents were very concerned for him. So his mother and also his father started to ask him, why? Son, what is troubling you? And of course, Ugasena then told his mother and his father what he wanted. He said, if I can marry that dancer, I shall live happily. But if I cannot have her, I will rather die right away. So that basically alarmed the parents. They felt a little bit concerned that he might commit suicide. Right? So they were trying to talk him out of it. So the mother was trying to talk him out of it. So the mother advised him, do not act in this way. We will bring you another maiden, our equal in birth and wealth. So what this really meant is that the mother promised that she will find another wife for Ugasena instead of that dancer, because the dancer is also not of the same level, right? Because they are wealthy people, whereas the dancer belonged to the level of the merchants, right? So now, and that is, merchants are considered one level below these wealthy and noble families. So the mother promised to find a wife for Ugasena from the same level, from the same caste, right? Both equal in both birth and wealth. But Ugasena did not want that. He really wanted this dancer. So Ugasena repeated his demand and remained in his bed, refusing to get up. So, well, in a way, you could say he was like a spoiled child, but he's a young man already, a youngster. So then his father was a little bit upset and started arguing with him, started telling him, this is not the way it is, don't do that, you cannot have her, they belong to this group, and so on. And they are not of the same caste, because in those days in India, people only marry people of the same level, same status and same wealth. And because she came from a lower level, the father was reluctant to want to have such a daughter-in-law. So the father actually had a big argument with Ugasena, but Ugasena was very insistent on his demand. Right? The father was unable to convince him and unable to help Ugasena break out of his depression and so on. So the father thought no choice. In order to please the son and prevent the son from committing suicide, then the father had to do something. So since he is of great wealth, then he gave in to Ugasena's demand and he summoned a good friend of Ugasena. So he summoned Ugasena's very good friend to come and represent the family and gave him 1,000 pieces of silver, saying to him, go to see the acrobat, and that is the father of the dancer. So the dancer was the daughter of an acrobat. So go and see that acrobat, the father of that dancer. Take this money and give it to the father. Give it to the acrobat and say to him that he should give his daughter to my son in marriage. So it's actually a very good offer in a way, if you think about it. In those days, in ancient India, when a family of a higher status, a higher caste level, offered marriage to people of a lower level, they often are very happy to accept it. So the father thought that the acrobat would agree to his terms. But of course, the acrobat doesn't want to give up his daughter. Okay, so the acrobat, the father of the dancer, then replied, I will not give my daughter for money. But if it be true that he cannot live without my daughter, then let him travel about with us. If he will do this, I will give him my daughter. That means the condition is that Uggasena has to leave his family of wealth and join the family of the acrobat together with the troupe, the performing troupe, right? And travel with them. That means the father of the dancer, the acrobat, will still have his own daughter with him, and Uggasena will be the son-in-law traveling together with the troupe. Of course, Uggasena realized that there's no other way, right? So his parents could not stop him from marrying the dancer and leaving with the troupe to travel across the country. So Uggasena decided, I will leave my family of wealth. I will now marry this beautiful dancer and join her family in this acrobatic troupe and travel around the country, across the country. So this is what he had thought about, that he wanted to do that. So he did that. He left the household and joined the troupe and married the beautiful dancer. And since he was himself, he was neither a dancer nor an acrobat nor a performer of any kind. He was not of much use to the troupe. He couldn't really help them in any way. He was just the son of a wealthy man with no special performing skills. So as the troupe moved from place to place, he started doing odd jobs in order to help the troupe, because that was the only way he could help them. He couldn't perform, so he started to do odd jobs, picking up things, packing things, carrying boxes, driving carts, taking care of the cows and the horses and all that. So a lot of odd jobs he was doing. So he was basically looked down upon by everybody as this odd job guy. You know, he was no longer treated as a son of a wealthy man. So, and over time, he and his beautiful dancer wife had a child. She gave birth to a son, and they're very happy to have this child. But as the child started to grow up, the mother, the dancer, did something very unpleasant. Right? Every time the mother is breastfeeding or taking care of the child, right, she would start singing this funny song, which basically went something like that. Oh, you son of the man who keeps watch over the carts, the man who carries boxes and bundles. Oh, you son of the ignorant one who can do nothing. So she kept singing something like that, insinuating that her husband, Uggasena, was useless. He could do nothing. He was just odd job carrying boxes around. And of course, Uggasena heard that. He heard the song. He realized that the wife was referring to him. And that really hurt his feelings very much. And he felt so angry about it. And they started arguing. Every time she sang that song, he would get very upset, and they started arguing. But she would not stop. She repeatedly sang that song whenever she was taking care of the child. So Uggasena was very depressed. In fact, during the argument, There were times when the dancer was so angry with the husband being good for nothing and not having any special skills, even told Uggasena, you can leave if you want, I will keep the son. Of course, Uggasena actually was a good man. He was not a bad man. He really loved his wife and he loved his child. So he was really reluctant to leave. In fact, Uggasena himself was quite an intelligent guy, but he did not have these dancing and acrobatic skills. That's why he did the odd jobs. And in that argument, in the series of arguments that followed, the wife literally told Uggasena, if you don't like it, you can leave. But Uggasena was very loyal. As a good husband and a good father, he stayed on. But he knew he had to do something. And the wife was behaving like that because the wife was earning a lot of money as a dancer. So she doesn't need the wealth of Uggasena's family. To her, that is no big deal. You know, she was also herself earning a lot of money together with her father, the acrobat, because of their dancing and performing. So she actually could do without Uggasena. That's why she didn't mind if Uggasena left. But Uggasena, being a good man, decided to stay. He was a good father and a good husband. So Uggasena grew increasingly agitated and felt very hurt and became very depressed. But Uggasena himself was an intelligent person. He was not, he was by no means very dumb and anything like that. He was intelligent. So he wanted to think, how can he solve this problem? And he realized there's only one simple way, right? But during all his thinking, right, he started to recall his past. So he was actually living in his memory of past and became quite regretful in a way that he had lost the honor and dignity as the son of a wealthy man. He realized he had given that up. So he was thinking about his past and felt very sad that he had given that up. Not that he wanted to return to his family, but he realized he had given up something very precious from his past. And then he reflected on his present predicament. He realized that not being much used to the group of performers, other than doing these odd jobs, he was often regarded as a useless guy, useless man. So he again felt very sad, right? But he was responsible. He did not give up his responsibility of doing his job. It's just that he was reflecting on his present predicament. And then he was just thinking. He started to think about for himself. He realized that if he really wanted to have a better future with the troupe, he must do something to be one of the performers and not just doing odd jobs. So that idea came to his mind, that the only way he can have a better future is to become a performer. So he had a bright idea. He went to see the father of his wife, the father-in-law, the acrobat, and begged the acrobat, please, sir, teach me acrobatics. So, of course, the father-in-law realized that it would be good for the family if the son-in-law was able to perform as well. So the father-in-law consented to teach Uggasena how to perform as an acrobat. And Uggasena, being a responsible person and an intelligent person, he was a fast learner. He learned very fast. In a very short time, he was able to learn a lot of the acrobatic skills. In fact, he became quite talented and skillful at it. So he worked very hard at it and practiced day in and day out. After 1 year of training and a lot of hard work, he was ready. Uggasena had now become a skillful acrobat. He was ready to perform. Right? So after 1 year of being a trainee, learning from the father-in-law, he was now able to perform very skillful acrobatic feats. So he was very happy. So he would be offered that chance. Of course, as I mentioned, this performing group traveled from place to place and arrived at Rajagaha once a year. So now, after 1 year, the group was on their way back to Rajagaha. So soon after, Ugasena was back in Rajagaha with the troupe. And they made a big announcement because Uggasena came from that town, from Rajagaha. So the troop was also very proud to say, now your local boy has come back. He's going to perform for all of you. So they made a big announcement that Uggasena would perform publicly, demonstrate his skills on the 7th day, the last day of their performance. Right? In 7 days' time, he will perform on the last day of the performance in front of the king. So Uggasena was really looking forward to it. So on the 7th day it came. They erected this very long pole, straight up, and it was meant for Uggasena to perform on. Then Uggasena went up the pole and stood on top of it, started his performance. And at a signal given to him below, he started to perform somersaults. And he somersaulted 7 times on the pole, amazingly, because he was so skillful now after being trained by the father-in-law. So he did this very fantastic acrobatic stunt, and everybody was so pleased. The crowd was really cheering and applauding, right? So the crowd was very happily applauding and cheering and watching Uggasena performing. Around the same time, and this is what Buddha often does early in the morning, when he gets out of his deep meditation, he starts to survey the land. And from time to time, he would survey the land with his divine eye to just watch over and see what's happening. And then he saw Uggasena. And he saw the Uggasena performing in front of the crowd. And the Buddha also saw in his vision. See, the Buddha had this 3 knowledges, Tevija. Right? The first knowledge to see his own past life. And the second knowledge is to see the past lives and the rebirth of other people, how they came to be, so he could also look into their future. So in his vision, the Buddha saw Uggasena and knew that Uggasena is now ready to attain arahantship, because Uggasena was a good man. He was basically, he didn't do anything wrong. He just fell in love with this beautiful dancer, but he had been doing a lot of good, taking good care of his own child. He was a good father, a good husband, a good son-in-law, and when he was with his parents, he was a good son. So the Buddha knew that Uggasena was a virtuous man, that he is now ready to become an arahant. The Buddha saw that Uggasena would become an arahant. So realizing that, the Buddha decided to head into Rajagaha just to see how things are happening there. So the Buddha entered Rajagaha, and as he entered Rajagaha, he saw that everybody was watching. The whole crowd was watching Uggasena. They were cheering and very happy because Uggasena is a local boy. So the audience was very happy. But the Buddha wanted to give his Dhamma talk. He wanted to teach the people. So he basically willed the people to turn their attention to him, back to the Buddha. And instead of spending their time watching the acrobatic stunts that Uggasena was performing. So he got all the crowd to listen to him as he delivered his teaching. And so the crowd no longer was paying attention to Uggasena. They were listening to the teachings of the Buddha. And of course, Uggasena, sitting high up on the pole, stopped performing. He realized that the crowd was not looking. Then he heard the Buddha's teachings. So from on top the pole, he heard the teachings of the Buddha. And of course, these teachings are good teachings, right? But at the same time, Uggasena was very disappointed. He spent 1 year preparing for this, and now people are not watching him anymore. So when Uggasena saw that he was being neglected and ignored by the crowd, he just sat on top of the pole, feeling utterly disappointed and depressed. Of course, he was also listening to the teachings of the Buddha, but he was himself feeling quite disappointed that the crowd was not watching him anymore. So Uggasena then thought to himself, here is a feat which it has taken me a year to perfect. But when the teacher enters the city, the audience, instead of looking at me, looks at the teacher. My exhibition has failed completely. So for a moment, he felt he was such a miserable failure. Right? He prepared for this and worked very hard for this, and he felt he was such a miserable failure. And at that time, then the Buddha realized Ugasena was feeling depressed. So the Buddha knew what would happen next, so he summoned Mahamoggallana, his chief disciple, and told Moggallana, go inform the young acrobat that the teacher desires him to exhibit his skill. So that actually was encouraging to Ugasena, because the Buddha instructed Moggallana to inform Ugasena that the Buddha is interested to watch him perform his skill. So Ugasena, so Mahamoggallana went to approach Ugasena and told him that, while Ugasena was still on top of the pole. And Mahamoggallana said to Ugasena, pray look, Ugasena, acrobat of mighty strength, perform for the crowd, make the people laugh, So Ugasena was very excited. Now he realized that now the Buddha wanted him to perform for the crowd, and the crowd would be watching him. So he did just that, right? On hearing this, Ugasena was delighted and thought, doubtless the teacher desires to witness my skill. And so he went on to perform, right? As he balanced himself on the top of the pole, Ugasena pronounced the following: pray look, Elder Moggallana, mighty in wisdom, mighty in magical power. I perform for the crowd. I make the people laugh. So he started performing and did some very wondrous somersaults and so on. And of course, the people were very excited, right? So after saying that to Moggallana, Ugasena then sprang into the air from the top of the pole. He was jumping up, and he actually made 14 somersaults instead of 7, double the number. This time he made 14 somersaults in the air. And then lighting on his feet, balanced himself once more on top of the pole. So after his 14 somersaults, he balanced himself perfectly on top of the pole. So this was very amazing. And of course, the crowd was very pleased. And the Buddha was also delighted to see that Ugasena responded positively. So the Buddha said to Ugasena, right? Basically, this is the advice. This is an advice that the Buddha gave to Ugasena. Ugasena, a wise man abandons all attachments to the khandha aggregates and strive to gain liberation from the round of rebirths. Now, I purposely leave this khandha aggregates in Pali term there because this is not easy to explain in plain English. And in this sentence, it makes more sense to leave it in Pali. So the Buddha said, Ugasena, a wise man abandons all attachments to the khandha aggregates and strive to gain liberation from the round of rebirths. So in other words, the Buddha, after his Dhamma talk and after his teaching and after seeing Ugasena was able to respond positively to his request to perform, and Ugasena did such a wondrous performance, he knew Ugasena is now ready to attain arahantship. So the Buddha gave this advice to Ugasena. So what is this khandha aggregates? Khandha aggregates is really referring to this experience, this existential experience of the body and mind, coming through the senses. So we have these 6 senses. 5 of them are physical senses, and the 6th sense is the mind. So the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and then tasting, and then cognizing. So these are the 6 senses. So basically, the Buddha's advice is that a wise man will abandon all attachments to these 6 sensory fields and strive to gain liberation from the round of rebirths. These are the 6 existential experiences of the body and mind. So the Buddha basically advised Ugasena to realize, right? Don't cling on to what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think about, right? Your memory, your imagination, and your expectations. So this is the advice that the Buddha gave to Ugasena. And of course, Ugasena, being an intelligent man, he knew what the Buddha was saying, right? So then the Buddha went on to utter this stanza, and for everyone to hear, that he said, give up the past, give up the future, give up the present. Having reached the end of existence, with a mind freed from all conditioned things, you will never again undergo birth and decay. So this is the Dhammapada verse 348. And that's what the Buddha actually said to Ugasena. Just a second. Okay. Yeah. So this is basically what the Buddha uttered this verse for everyone to hear. Right? Now, that is not the end of the story. There is more to it. Okay. Then Ugasena, as he stood poised on the tip of the pole on top there, having heard the teachings of the Buddha earlier on, having responded to the Buddha and performed according to the Buddha's instruction, and now hearing these final stanzas delivered by the Buddha, he immediately attained arahantship. And he, not only that, he also gained some powers, some special powers. So he actually became attained this arahantship on top of the pole after doing all that performance, after hearing the teachings of the Buddha and then hearing the Buddha uttering the stanzas, right? And that was quite amazing. And immediately, Ugasena then jumped down from the pole, alighted from the pole, and landed very quickly. And he just came down without even thinking twice. And then he advanced to the Buddha, walked towards the Buddha, paid his homage to the Buddha, saluted to the Buddha, and then asked the Buddha for permission to join the order of monks. He now wanted to become a monk, having already become an arahant. Right? So he now asked Buddha for permission to join the order of the monks. And the Buddha consented immediately. The Buddha stretched out his right hand and said to Ugasena, "Come, monk." So this is a very simple response to say you are now a monk. Basically, the Buddha stretching out his right hand literally ordained Ugasena, and now Ugasena is a monk and is already an arahant. So, and instantaneously, Ugasena was, as I said earlier, he attained that with higher powers, as you see in the first sentence on the top, the first phrase there, higher powers. And with that higher powers, as soon as he was ordained, he immediately, with that higher power, obtained the 8 requisites. And not only that, he suddenly transformed into an elder monk of 60. Originally, Ugasena was a young man. Now he became an elderly man of 60. Right? So he's a monk, an arahant, 60 years old, transformed into a 60-year-old man, and immediately had those 8 requisites. So all the monks are allowed 8 requisites according to the rules, the monastic rules. Okay, the Vinaya rules allow a monk to have 8 requisites. I can't recall, but I'll just mention them. 3 robes, that's 3, plus 5 other things. A shaving blade for shaving the head, a belt for tying the rope, and then alms bowl for getting alms food, and then something to filter out, a water filter, something to filter out dirty water from the pond so that he could have clean water to drink. Then I can't remember, there's one more. So altogether, 8 requisites. So Ugasena, with these higher powers, suddenly was able to produce and obtain these 8 requisites instantaneously, right? And referring to Ugasena, rapid descent from the pole, the monks did not know Ugasena had become an arahant. They saw Ugasena jump down from this very high pole, landed very quickly, steadily, with no fear. So they were curious. So went to ask Ugasena. They didn't know that Ugasena had become an arahant already, but they saw the Buddha welcome him as a monk, so they knew that he is now a monk. So they are brother monks. So they said to Ugasena, these monks, young monks said to Ugasena, brother, had you no fear as you descended from that pole of such great height? Because they were curious. He jumped down from this high pole and not feeling any fear, right? They didn't know he was already an arahant. Then Ugasena replied simply, my brothers, I have no fear. So he basically said that. But the monks were curious. They did not believe him. So the monks went to the Buddha and reported to the Buddha and said, Reverend Sir, Ugasena says, I have no fear. He says that which is not true. He utters falsehood. They thought that Ugasena was lying. They thought that Ugasena was fearful, but did not want to admit. So therefore, they reported to the Buddha thinking that Ugasena was lying. Okay, and this is when the Buddha responded after this. Monks, those monks who, like my son Ugasena, having severed all attachments, have no fear or perturbation. Now, this word perturbation simply means there is no shaking. The word perturbability, there is this shaking. It's talking about the mind. The mind is perfectly still. The mind is not disturbed anymore by any defilements. The mind is perfectly cleansed, perfectly still. And this state of perfect stillness and purity of mind is really the liberation by mind, akupa ceto vimutti. So that means Ugasena had attained this liberation by mind, akupa ceto vimutti. The mind is perfectly still. Akupa ceto vimutti is translated by Pandit Punaji as imperturbable serenity of mind. That means a mind that is perfectly still, free from all contaminations, free from all defilements. So the mind is perfectly still. So this is really the meaning of akupa ceto vimutti. Right? And then the Buddha went on to pronounce this next stanza. In addition to the earlier one, he said, having cut off all fetters, he trembles no more. He has given up all bondages and is emancipated. Such a man I call a Brahman. The word Brahman refers to noble disciples of the Buddha. And here it is an enlightened disciple. Ugasena being an enlightened disciple. So the Buddha said, having cut off all fetters. So we are bonded by 10 fetters, right? And when you are able to cut off all 10 fetters, you become an arahant. And that is what Ugasena did. Right? He trembles no more, but that means he's fearless. He has no fear, no emotional reaction. He has given up all bondages and is emancipated. That means he is now liberated from all suffering. This is what the Buddha meant, and this is actually Dhammapada verse 397. Okay. So we have covered these 2 Dhammapada verses with this story of Ugasena. The first is Dhammapada verse 348. right? Talking about giving up the past, giving up the future, giving up the present. And this way we are able to free ourselves from the notion of existence, the dream of existence. And when the mind is freed from these conditioned things, then such a person will never be born again, right? Will never return to undergo birth and decay anymore. The person is completely freed from all suffering. Okay. Now, I would like to share with you an explanation by Bhante Punanji.
So from there on, gradually, the teaching started deteriorating. Gradually, it became, they started mainly talking about karma and rebirth. They stopped talking about what are called the Four Noble Truths. There in one of the sutras, the Buddha points out, if a person begins to think in terms of past, present and future lives, did I exist in the past? Will I exist in the future? Am I existing now? If you begin to think like that, your belief in self will become confirmed, and as a result, you will not be able to enter nirvana. There in the Sabbasava Sutra begins with that statement. And then the Buddha says, when a person begins to think in terms of suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, and the way leading to the end of suffering, such a person will get the idea of self to disappear, and we become a sotapanna, a stream entrant. So in other words, just talking about karma and rebirth misleads people. But today, the main belief has become karma and rebirth. People think that if you don't believe in karma and rebirth, you are not a Buddhist. But that is all nonsense according to the teaching of the Buddha. There, even in the Kalama Sutra, the Buddha points out that a person who understands the teaching of the Buddha properly and begins to practice it doesn't have to worry about karma and rebirth. That is completely explained. Not only Kalama, there are other sutras where the Buddha says the same thing. So the important thing is to understand the Four Noble Truths.
The important thing, therefore, we should not be attached to the notion of karma and rebirth. We know karma exists. We know there is rebirth, but we should not be attached to those notions. Right? So it's important for us to understand the Four Noble Truths. That is the first thing we need to do, to learn and understand the Four Noble Truths as the beginning on the way to awakening. Now, next, we also have this next verse that we looked at, where the Buddha uttered, having cut off all fetters, he trembles no more. He who has given up all bondages and is emancipated, such a man I call a Brahman. So that's what the Buddha uttered. It's very important to realize that we have to learn how to free ourselves from these attachments. So let's hear an explanation by Bhante Punaji.
Once there was a deva, some kind of celestial being, who came to the Buddha and said, in a verse says, Upaniyati jivita mappa mayu jarupanitassa nasantitana etang bayang marane pikkamanu punyani kairata sukhavani. What that means is, Upaniyati jivitamappa mayu means life goes on from birth to death. Life goes on from birth to death. That means everyone has to die. And if there is anyone who is in fear of death, lead a good life so that you can go to heaven. That is why most religions are talking about that. But the Buddha points out, the Buddha said, the same thing but changed the last line. Upaniyati jivita mappa mayu jarupanitassa nasantitana etang bayang marane pikkamano lokamisang pajehe santipekko. What he said was, it is true that all people who are born has to die. But if a person is really afraid of death, he should give up attachment to all kinds of existence and purify the mind, to free the mind of all attachments. So that is the meaning of nirvana. And to go to nirvana, of course, is not the same thing as going to heaven. Because even if you go to heaven, the time comes for death. A person is not free of death by going to heaven. That is what he points out. If you want to be free from death, you have to give up all attachments and purify the mind to such a level where all attachments disappear. This is why the Buddha pointed out that the normal lay life, you cannot attain nirvana. That is why it is necessary to give up all attachments if you are interested in attaining nirvana. This is the meaning.
I want to then share with you an important explanation by Bhante Punaji about birth and existence, answering the simple question, right? Why do we exist? And of course, when we ask the average person, why do we exist? And people would say, oh, I exist because I have been born. This is what they say.
We have been born. We are born, we grow old, fall sick and die. And what is the cause of birth? Why are we born? Now the important thing is that we think we have come into existence. And how did we come into existence? Because we were born. But here the Buddha is pointing out we didn't come into existence because we were born. This is an interesting thing. We were born because we have come into existence. Normally people think that we have come into existence because we were born. Here the Buddha points out that we were born because we have come into existence. Bhavapacca jati. Not jatipacca bhava. This is the interesting thing. Then the problem comes up, how did we come into existence? This is the interesting thing. How did we come into existence? There the Buddha points out, upadhana pacca bhava. Upadhana means personalizing. Upadhana means to take inside. By personalizing, we have come into existence.
By personalizing, we have come into existence. So this is a very important thing. So in the next slide, we will explain this a little further. Right? You recall in this story of Uggasena, there was this part where the Buddha said to Ugasena, that a wise man abandons all attachments to the khandha aggregates and strive to gain liberation and from the round of rebirths, right? Liberation from all suffering. So as I mentioned earlier, this khandha aggregate is talking about this existential experiences of the body and the mind based on what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and also what we cognize in the mind, the six fields, right? The six khandhas. Now, Bhante mentioned about this upadhana. It is this upadhana that leads to the notion of existence, and it is this existence that then leads to rebirths. So upadhana, basically, Bhante explained, is personalizing our experiences, subjective experience and objective experience. The word upadhana is often translated as clinging, sometimes grasping, or attaching, or attachments. So what we experience around us, that is the objective experience. So we are aware of things we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. That is the objective experience. And then we feel something about this experience. And this feeling inside is the subjective experience. And we tend to cling on, personalize all these subjective and objective experiences. And it is this clinging on that leads to the notion of existence. And with the notion of existence, that leads to all future rebirths. Now, this upadhana, Bhante translate as personalizing, right? Although it is commonly translated as clinging. Let me explain this. This is made of two Pali root words, upa and dana, right? Actually, it's upa and adana. And all of you know what dana is. Dana is giving. You give. That is called dana. But here, the root word is adana. When there's an A in front of the Pali word, it is the opposite meaning. So adana means taking, to take. So upa is inside, within, or going inside. So upa adana means to take it and bring it inside. That means we are personalizing everything that we are experiencing. When we see something, we feel something about it, we personalize and say, I like it, I don't like it. So the I, me, or mine is very strong. And that is the upadhana. And because of this upadhana, it leads to the notion of existence. If I like something, it's therefore I must exist.
Because you have reacted to it. So now you are not only seeing something there, you are also aware of a reaction. Where is the reaction? The reaction is something subjective. What you saw was something objective. So your experience is now divided into two, the object and the subject. And what is subjective? You say, the desire is mine, the hatred is mine, that awareness is mine. You personalize the subjective. When the subjective is personalized, what happens? How can you say this is mine if there is no I here? So the moment you personalize something, you have created the I. I am. This is why Descartes thought, I think, therefore I am. Because he personalized the thinking. The moment he personalized the thinking, he created the self. That's how it happens.
These Dhammapada verse stories came from the commentaries, right? The Dhammapada only contained the sayings. It did not contain the elaborations of the stories. The stories were mentioned only in the commentaries. So I obtained my versions from the commentaries. Okay. All right. Remember to download the presentation slides. If you have any more questions after this, please feel free to send me an email or contact me by messaging through Facebook. Right. With this, I think we will end our sharing. We spent this 1.5 hours together and had a very productive time sharing the Dharma. We are very fortunate. There are a lot of people out there still suffering from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. So with all the merits that we have accumulated from this very meritorious action together, let us put our palms together and share these merits and dedicate them to the people who are still experiencing difficulties with the coronavirus pandemic. We dedicate the merits we have acquired from sharing the Buddha Dhamma to all beings affected by the coronavirus pandemic around the world. May suffering beings be suffering free. May the fear-struck fearless be. May grieving beings shed all grief. May all beings find peace and relief. By the grace of the merits we have acquired, may we never follow the foolish. May we follow only the wise until we attain the highest and most supreme bliss of Nibbana. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope to see you again next Monday, same time. So please, I wish that you and your family, please stay safe. May you be well, comfortable, peaceful, and happy. Thank you very much and have a good evening. And for those of you who are in United States, have a good morning. And those of you who are in Europe, have a good afternoon. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.